Mrs. Milton, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Berwick,
I'm present.
Mr. Jinks,
Here.
and Mr. Milone. We have a quorum present.
And we have our guest, who is an ex officio member of all committees, Mayor Slocum. And then we also have other guests that are not members. But so we'll call the meeting to order. We did the roll. The pledge we'll dispense with until the next meeting, because we're going to do it again as a group. And so we'll go right into the update on medical trust fund. I know Mr. Massiana has another meeting following this one, as we do. So we'll go right into his news that he's been reporting to the Board of Ed and go from there.
Okay, hopefully you can see from my screen a medical benefits update report with some red on it.
Yeah, too much red, yes.
Okay, so some of you may be familiar with this report, but I'll walk you through from the top very quickly. So up in the top section, what we have is the beginning balance in the trust fund as of July 1, which was $924,908. The town council, as I'm sure you're all aware, approved a $1.5 million one-time direct contribution to the reserve fund. So that's reflected at the top here. So July 1, we started with a total of the $1.5 million plus the $924,000, so about $2.4 million. Moving down on the left side, what we've contributed from our budget, which was approved, is $4,926,000, about $815,000 a month. You could see that there's no stop loss reimbursement. Stop loss in our case is any claims that exceed $175,000 for an individual. Even though that's a zero, I double asterisked it because I know based on the claims we've received, we're expecting $370,000 in stop loss to be paid. So those are individual claims over the $175,000. There are two large ones that we already know that we will be getting stop loss reimbursements, and that process usually takes about 60 days. We've received prescription rebates through Cigna of $251,000, and there's also been interest and other adjustments of $325,000. So contributions in total $5,504,298. Then if we look at the monthly claims, this is the red, you see that we started the year in July with claims of about $1.1 million, same in August, dropped a little in September and October below the $1 million mark, and then November was back up to 1.1 million, and December was $1.5 million, which that is the highest claim month we've ever seen. But I will tell you that we had two significant claims that hit that claim month. So the total of the claims year to date is $6.879 million. The thing that's important to note is that the expected claim rate was about $900,000 per month this year, and we're exceeding that. So that's certainly working against us, and that's why if you look each month, other than July when the 1.5 million went in, we've been reducing the balance in that reserve fund. So as of December 31, which is when this report is through, the net year-to-date additions, less claims, reduced the trust fund balance by about 1.375 million. So as of December 31st, I highlighted it here, our reserve balance is $1,049,247. However, that will go up by the $370,000 in stop loss, and then that'll be offset by whatever claims we have for the rest of the year. I will also highlight that about 76% of our employees participate in the high deductible health plan, and that's on a July to June plan year. So as of January 1, so the month we're in now, all the deductibles reset. So what we typically see the first 2 to 3 months of the year is a drop in the claims rate because employees are spending against the deductible that they have not met yet. The bottom section of this report just shows you some year over year, and this is year to date. So on a year to date basis, our average claims have been 1.146 million per month, which is 5.5% above where we were at this same period last month. If you want to take some good news out of this, if you look at the prior year, we were up 22% over the prior year. So even though claims haven't leveled off, they're certainly not rising to the level that they did that we saw previously. I do have some more slides that I wanted to show you what's happening, within our claims above 25,000. But before I get to that, maybe it's worth pausing and see if there's any questions on this.
I do have a couple of questions because you mentioned a little bit about the cyclical nature of some of this and the fact that January, February, new calendar year, there's going to be a little bit of a drop off. Do you have a projection sort of in your mind of what might happen by the end of the fiscal year? I mean, you sort of have to do some planning.
If it's always difficult because, claims are unpredictable, but I'm going to go with, we'll hit, if we wind up hitting the claims run rate that was expected of 900,000 a month. Part of what's embedded in this year is that even though we're expecting claims of 900,000 a month, we're only contributed 815,000 a month. So each month, if we hit 900,000 in claims, we're going to drop 85,000 per month in the medical benefits reserve. So 85,000 times 6, it's going to be, roughly another $500,000, a little bit more than that will see erosion to the medical benefits reserve. That will be offset by any other stop loss claims that we receive, any additional prescription rebate that we receive. Last year, for example, our prescription rebates were a little over 400,000. So, if what I just said is the case, then we still will have a reserve fund balance left at the end of the year. Won't be large, but it won't be zero. So I think that's probably what we would all want to hope for, and that's probably the best case scenario. I don't see claims dropping off precipitously. Even if you look pre-pandemic and pre-last year when we saw the big increase of 22%, claims were, above 850,000 a month. So I don't think we're going to get down below that. And, we know that medical inflation, nationally is running somewhere about, if you look at the last 10 years, it's been about 7%. I think I may have a slide that shows that. Even with these big jumps, we're running below the inflation rate for medical, but there is an inflation rate built in, right? So, that's the best answer I could give you, David. If I had a crystal ball, I would gladly take it out right now. It's a rough period, no doubt.
Well, and also probably a good time to just remind everybody what our thinking was last budget season, last March and April and May, actually, because we had a little extra time. That we did know that that you were going to be under budgeting. That was purposely agreed with the council. It's not a board ed issue. It's the council agreed that was the case because we put the $1.5 million extra in there, and we try to keep a month and a half, ideally 2 months, but a little bit more claims available. And that by putting the $1.5 million in there, you could spend down the 900,000 that was left and roughly still have that $1.5 million. I mean, at the moment, that's about where you are. The 1,049,000 plus the 370, you're right about at that. So if the second half of the fiscal year comes in at the 900,000 that we were told to expect, then the $500,000 is us, and that's our fault, and that's what we're doing. But like you said, that could happen. It may not. But yeah, why are they so far off when they're telling us 900,000 and it's 1.1 million? So the way they calculate the expected and the expected, and by the way, I want to go back to one point. I don't think it's anybody's fault that we funded the way we did. It was, like you said, it was known, it was calculated risk. The money's there. I mean, the 1.5 million is there. So it did certainly buoy up the medical benefits reserve. It's going to make next year's budget look that much, of a sharper increase because we didn't fund it through the budget, that $1.5 million.
but it's nobody's fault. We kind of knew that this was one of the possibilities. So when they calculate the expected, and they being USI is our benefits consultant, and they get the information from Cigna. The way they calculate it is they do a rolling 12 months average of the prior claims, and then they make some assumptions based on medical trends that are happening outside of our particular pool of claims. Like last year, they had an increased factor because of COVID. So, the reason that they were expecting 900,000 a month is because the prior 12 months, that's about where we were running. We did receive the preliminary renewal information for 22-23, and guess what? That rolling 12-month average it's about $1 million a month. So not surprisingly, because we've hit $1 million per month in claims, looking forward, that expected is going up. And that's unfortunate because it is a significant increase that we're going to have to fund. But I do have some more information, as I said, that'll give you a little bit more insight into what's happening within those claims and why we're above the 900,000 that was expected. Let me see.
You want to go to that, or do you want me to see if there's questions on this part from other committee members first?
Yep.
Okay, why don't we, before we leave this page, Jim or John or Tim?
I'm good.
You also just speak up.
Yeah, I don't have anything.
Okay.
David, I do have a question. Since I wasn't here last year, it says the 1.5 million was a one-time contribution. Is that now becoming an every year contribution?
That wasn't the intent at the time, but it may have to be if that's what the budget is going to be dictated by the expected claims.
But it also was something other than that. It was ARPA funds.
Yeah, ARP funds, right?
Yeah. So that was one of the difference. And just for the lingo, John, that was money we got from the federal government, I guess.
Yeah, part of the 8 million.
Yeah.
So that's a problem, and then you'll get into more detail, but are you going to look at alternatives for 22-23, given the fact that the claims are going to be higher? I don't know how much your contributions are going to be in relation to that, and that we're looking at funding now, plus possibly out of town funds, or are we staying the course?
No, I mean, what we've recommended in the budget that's been presented to the Board of Ed is an increase to this medical benefits line of 2.2 million, so that we're funding our medical claims rate equal, we're putting contributions equal to expected claims. Because if we don't do that, then we're going to be having this conversation every year. So if you look at the board's budget that was presented, we're looking for a 22% increase in this particular medical benefits account line. Part of it is the 1.5 million we didn't fund in the operating budget last year. And the difference is what we need to have our contributions equal claims. And there is I think, a broader discussion that we've started having, that we know we have to have, about what's the right way to fund our operating budget for expected medical claims. Because what we've done over the years is, as we've built up a strong reserve, and we did up until 3 years ago, our reserve was 4 million. So we started gradually using it by not funding it into the operating budget. And then you have a tough, high claims year, higher than expected. And then all of a sudden you really dwindle down those reserves. And so when you have to start making those catch-up contributions, it's painful.
Yeah. So I guess my question really is, are we just going to accept the fact that things increase and we have to just fund it? I'll have to get my head into this at a level that I don't have right now, because again, I'm new, but are there alternatives that don't involve us having to continue to increase funding from the general fund?
Well, I mean, if you're thinking, John, can we, change providers? Can we change plan options? Those are all things that we can do and have done. We moved to Cigna from Anthem in 2019. our employees, through the bargaining unit agreements we have, they do pay a higher share of the total costs. I mean, this year, employees are going to pay about 1.8 million out of the total $14 million that we expect. And obviously, most of that is claims, but it's not all claims. There's expenses associated with, having a self-insured, fund administrator like Cigna, and we pay for stop loss insurance. But unfortunately, I think the short-term answer is we have to fund the claims rate. It is our responsibility. How we do that, we can adjust. That's what we did this year. But, I know this becomes, it seems like every 5 or 6 years, we wind up with this situation where we've just got to start funding up, catching up to our claims rate through contributions in the board's budget.
Okay. No, I understand. Okay, thank you.
And one other thing to keep in mind is that we won't be adopting until April. So we will have the experience rate for January, February, and March as well. And especially if those tend to be a little bit lower historically, it will make this average not look quite as bad as it does at the moment. But just some thought. It should be.
That's a good point. And I hope time proves us all right.
Yeah. All right. And then,
all right. So,
yeah,
I'm going to just run through these pretty quickly, but this is a port. I took some slides out of the budget presentation that was made to the board. So over in the left-hand column, you can see the fiscal year, but the column next to that, this is information that came from Price Waterhouse Coopers. They published a research study, which I didn't think of it. I should have shared that, with the members of the budget committee. But these are the medical, United States medical cost trends going back to 2008, 2009. And you could see, they were pretty high, going back to 8, 9, then they settled down and then they started coming up a little bit. But the average growth per year is 7.1%. What I showed in that next section over is what were the gross medical claims that we had since that period. And you could see they do ebb and flow a lot differently than the US medical cost trend, right? We're a smaller plan. You're looking at a national average versus, what's happening in the Cheshire Public School claims pool. And we cover, roughly 500 employees in our claims pool. But even with the spike that we had in 2021, our average growth per year has been about 5.2%. And I think a good part of that has to do with the fact that we do manage our plans aggressively, or as aggressively as we can, working with our carriers. It was Anthem, now Cigna. We have wellness programs in place. We do try and mitigate some of the prescription costs with different options. And then the far right 2 columns, that takes into consideration our net claims. So we take the gross claims, and then if you subtract out the stop loss reimbursements and the prescription rebates and interest, that brings us down a little bit below a little below 5%. That's just to put some context around where we are, as a plan provider. The next few slides, and I think this is, I'm going to skip this because we kind of talked it through. What this shows is for the 6-month periods, so July to December, which is the information we have for 2021, the number of claims that were 25,000 or greater in 2019, if you could see, I have my cursor on it. During that 6-month period of time, we had 25 claims over 25,000. And you could see last year, same period of time, it grew to 45 claims. And this year it's leveled off at 43 claims, but certainly higher than the 25. Same information, except looking at the dollars. In the first 6 months of the plan year in 2019, those claims were 1,438,000. Last year, they jumped to 2.9 million, and this year they're at about 2.8 million. So we've seen a pretty substantial increase. And again, this is for a 6-month period of time. Why that's happening, I can't exactly say because I don't know, but it is people having a severe illness for the most part. So this is the July to December 2019 period. And all I'm highlighting here quickly is the 25 claims totaling 1.4 million. The average claim amount was about 57,500. And you could see the reason or the diagnosis, most of the, 7 of the claims, with an average of 83,000 were people with cancer diagnosis. Bone and joint could be anything from, hip replacement to injury. There were 5 of those. Those were not quite as high per claim, 46,000. I know everybody can read, so I'm just going to point out during this 6-month period of time, we had no stop loss reimbursement. And in 2019, again, which was a better year, only about 27% of our claims were above this $25,000 threshold. So for that year-to-date period, we had 5.3 million total claims. About 1,438,000 were above 25,000. So now we hit the first bad year, which was last July to December, 45 claims. You could see that we had the same number of cancer claims, but the average amount increased to 95,910. So we had 45 claims. We did have 144,000 in stop loss reimbursement during that 6-month period. But of the total $6.5 million in claims for that period, the 2.9 million takes us from 27% to about 44% of the claim dollars were for these higher cost claims. And then similarly, this July to December, what really jumped out here is this one, heart, arterial, blood, 10 claims averaging 111,000 and over $1 million. So, that is a good part of the spike that we're seeing this particular July to December. As I mentioned before, during this period, we do have 370,000 in stop loss expected, and the claims above 25,000 represent about 40% of all our claims. I'm going to just show you one more thing, and then I'll answer some questions. The other item that's driving up claims, does have to do with COVID. Even though we haven't had any one overly large COVID claim, somebody that has been on a respirator for months, the claims have grown by a factor of 3. Now, this is a report that we received from Cigna. What I'm going to draw your attention to, if you could see the blue highlight, this is last January to December, and it's board and town combined. I don't get this report broken out, but total COVID-related costs were 133,926, of which 115,000 was for testing and 18,000 was for treatment. If we look at that same period for 21, January to December of 21, that total increased to 438,000 from the roughly 135,000. And interestingly, at least to me, most of that, 369,000 is testing, 25,000 is treatment. Again, we haven't had any, thankfully, anybody that had a very severe illness and hospitalization. So treatments, 25,000, vaccinations of 43,000. This is the employer spend, right? Down below, there's a $514,000 number. That's if you include what our employees paid, but so the cost of COVID is within our claim pool. I would say that it's a factor. It's not extraordinary. If you look, the town represents about somewhere around 25% of total claims. So you would take 75% of that number as a round number and say, that's in the claims cost for the Board of Education employees. So that was, the high-level update that I wanted to provide. If you want to see even more detail, you can watch the video of the presentation from last Tuesday to the board. I took, some time and went through a lot more detail, but these are the high-level facts that we have at this point.
Hey, Vin, I had a question, if I may. It's on a page you haven't put up, but it's on the reverse side of the same data. And where you're showing average members, 1,800 individuals tested. And then the percent of membership vaccinated is about 44%. Now, I'm assuming that's like all members of a plan. So there could be children in there that weren't. Could you just dissect that a little, or if not, just say that I'm correct? It's a blending of staff and
You're
their
right.
families.
If you look at the school staff vaccination rate, we're well above 95%. And the way we know that is because employees that aren't vaccinated have to test weekly. So the vast majority of employees are vaccinated. That doesn't mean the dependents are
Right.
vaccinated, right, to your point. So,
Yeah, because
Especially the
I
children.
first looked at the number and it was just like, are you kidding me? But then
Yeah.
I realized you got 1,800 people there and we don't have 1,800.
exactly,
Okay.
exactly.
Their children, many of them that have children that are on the family plan will certainly
Right.
cut that down,
And
especially.
maybe even a spouse who's not even on the plan. So
Yeah. Other questions, John or Jim?
I just have just to clarify two questions. One is the testing number, which is dramatic there. Is that what it sounds like? That's standard going to the drugstore, getting tests? It's reimbursement for that stuff?
Yeah, well, it could be they go to the drugstore. It could be they go to like Mid-State and they get on the line to be tested. It's not any home kit testing included in these numbers because that was not permitted previously, but it's wherever employees go. We know employees have gone to like walk-in clinics. They've waited online with Hartford Healthcare, or some of the other providers like Yale that are offering testing. So when you go for testing, if you have medical coverage and you show your card, we do get bills for that.
Right.
And it's not been reimbursed. I mean, I know that there's been a lot of federal funds that have been made available for different things, but this is not a covered cost. And I'm sure everybody heard that the administration recently required that any medical benefits provider has to allow employees to be reimbursed for any home COVID test kits up to, I think it's 32 a month. So we haven't started seeing those reimbursement requests yet. We're required to do it by law. We have a procedure set with Cigna. I don't know what to expect. It may be minimal, but yeah, those are, again, it's kind of interesting that
That's
there's
interesting.
been a lot of federal money, but not attributable to offset this.
Amazing. And I had no idea it adds up to that much money when you look at it. The other thing was you said you had a presentation last week, Tuesday or something. That was, I assume, from Cigna going through this, or is that what you're talking about?
It was a presentation that I made the first part, and then Tom Kowalczyk, who's our benefits consultant from USI, he did a significant portion of it. And what he did is he took the finance committee and board members through the preliminary renewal analysis that was just completed, so that everybody gets an understanding of what's involved. I mean, it is, if you don't do this for a living, it's complicated. And I don't do this. I know our numbers, but the actual analysis is not something I do for a living. So I rely on USI, to lead us through that.
And I don't know how much flexibility, and I don't want to beat this up too much, but did they recommend anything to try and because I mean, we've used Cigna. I think they do a wonderful job. But every year we look towards options to keep things in line as opposed to just have it cost more. In fact, this year we went down, and we're not a small company, 500 people in the United States. So we were able to get our costs down as opposed to going up. But did they suggest anything to stem the tide for what's going on here?
The answer is yes. We have not specifically there's nothing direct that we can do to offset the claims, but the programs that they offer, either Cigna or through USI, are things that we look at, and we did receive some recommendations from Cigna. We just did our annual review at the end of November. And so we're looking at some of the programs that they have. A couple that come to mind that we currently offer is we rolled out a program through Livongo, which provides diabetes management for individuals who have diabetes, not pre-diabetics, diabetes. And the program includes monitoring through the glucose monitor actually is cellular enabled. So whenever someone takes their glucose reading, it transmits it to Livongo, and Livongo will take steps if someone hasn't been doing the glucose readings, or if they have an extraordinarily high glucose reading, they'll follow up by phone or text, to the employee. And as part of that, they do supply, the diabetic supply, so that there's, a program in place that people with diabetes, if they follow the program, will have healthier lives and won't wind up with some significant claims. Another program offered through Cigna is called OMADA. This is pre-hypertension, pre-diabetes. So it's a voluntary program, but it does help employees that have either of those two conditions, to live a healthier lifestyle. Some of the other financial programs, do include, pharmacy management. So there's, requirements that if there's a new prescription issued, you have to, for certain medications, you have to try the generic first before you go to the brand name. Generics, are less expensive. So those are some of the ones that come to mind, John. Cigna did recommend some new programs, that we are going to look at. A lot of the newer programs do have to do with health and wellness before and prevention of significant events, and including cardio. Cancer is obviously early screening detection. That just reminds me, we did a mailing to all our employees in October. It was basically colorectal cancer test kit, so it got mailed to employees' homes. Again, it was selective to those employees who met age criteria, who hadn't had any colorectal screening within, I think, a 2-year period of time. So.
Okay. Yeah, if we're going to look at having to come up with more funds to support this, I just want to make sure we're looking at all options to reduce costs and alternatives to. And again, I'm new at this, and I don't know, what limitations we have because our contractual agreements with the unions and things like that. So I'm just speaking a little bit in general terms right now. But, yeah.
One other quick, if I could jump in, I don't know if you can prevent, if you could possibly minimize for just a minute, we can see folks.
Oh, yeah, I think I'm going to stop sharing. I can always go back.
Just to jump in, if I could, Mr. Chair, one other thing that we've talked about, and Jim and I just talked about this the other day, that is a good practice every couple of years anyway, but particularly when you have a high claims year, is to do an eligibility audit and just make sure you don't have any ineligible dependents or any ineligible, ex-spouses or anyone on there, because, heaven forbid, they are generating a large claim. You want to make sure, as a self-funded plan, we want to make sure that everybody on our plan is actually supposed to be there. And every once in a while, you'll find somebody who slips through the cracks, or a dependent that should have aged out. And if one of those becomes a large claim, you obviously don't want to have that in there. So.
Yeah, thanks, Sean.
Any other questions?
An observation, if you look at the claims in the 3 years demonstrated, a high percentage of just the blocks they occupy are heart, arterial, and then the other GI, human systems types of claims, which are, whatever you can do to mitigate those, I guess we would avail ourselves of that. But again, I think to John's point, or to answer him, John, it's usually shouldered by the taxpayers, unfortunately. And that's why we've sort of played some, I don't want to say games with it, but there's been more finessing of this because of the taxing impacts. Because that's usually how it has to be addressed. And I think that's why we're having this serious conversation tonight and to follow, because the implications are bad.
Understand.
And
As David said, we'll have some more insight by the time, we get in front of the council with the budget request. Claims, I always say, we cross our fingers. I do think they'll, we know they ebb and flow, but I do think they will level off. Where that leveling off point is remains to be seen. But they won't go up forever. We have seen they kind of ladder up and then they stabilize, for a few years. So hopefully that happens soon. It seems like it's been going on for a long time. It has. And then the other thing that our consultant did note, and I think we've seen it on the town side, is that they did not have the same experience as we have. Most plans, according to our consultant, during the first year of COVID, the claims actually did drop down because a lot of people were not doing anything elective. They stayed away, from the doctor. It's just, for whatever reason, our population did not have, that experience. We did see a lot of people, with serious illness.
Hey, do you want us to do a quick summary of the town side, or I know I'm just being kind of.
Yeah, but Jim, did you have a question about?
Yeah, I just had one question, Sean, for Vin. So as far as the testing costs, is it that we don't have funds left from the various federal reimbursements and things that we've received over the last couple of years, or is it that these just don't qualify for those reimbursements?
Well, they're processed through claims, through the Cigna claims process. That's why they were appearing there. And so it's not, even if we wanted to pay for it through federal funds, we would have to do that, through our operating budget by making a contribution to the reserve fund.
Okay.
But it's important to keep them in that claims bucket, obviously, because that is the history of claims.
Right.
We certainly could
Okay.
talk about that as in when we get to item 6, what we might want to spend the ARPA funds on. That certainly, we knowing that we're going to hear the report then, knowing that we're going to have some monies that we could spend at our discretion within limits. This could be one of the offsetting things we might be able to justify and say we want to spend on, but that's for a little later if we get time. Sean,
Yeah,
did you
I
want to go over?
I was kind of
Oh, sorry.
referring, actually, I was referring more to the funds that were dedicated to the education side. more
Right, the
than
ESSER
the
funds and the
ARPA
others,
funds.
right. No, I knew that, and Vince answered that, but there is still the ability to potentially say we can shift some money from ARPA into the trust fund, medical trust fund, for that reason, offsetting that. But thank you. All right, Sean, you wanted to give an update of the general town government side?
Sure, I'll just go very briefly. So again, as Vin had alluded, we're fortunately having a better experience this fiscal year. We had our kind of roller coaster year last year, but ultimately ended up okay in the final. I should say, fiscal 20, we had our roller coaster year. Fiscal 21 was pretty good. But this year, you can see here, again, our first 6 months, we expect to have claims of about 310,000 a month. We've actually been under every month, 6 months in a row. Knock on wood that continues, of course. Ultimately, the way we have ours kind of outlined here, hopefully I can scroll down. There we go. Go past that one. Here we are. So what we have is we expect, so here's our balance, almost $2.1 million as of the end of December. Here's our expected contributions. Again, ours happen to be broken out between the town, the treatment plant, and the community pool, which all pay their own shares into the insurance trust fund for their employees. That totals an expected additional 1.8 million we'd be putting in the next 6 months for a total of 3.896 million before claims. And then what we do down here, I know this is new for you, John, but again, it's pretty self-explanatory. We try to average. We take either the highest 3-year average in dollars or in percent that those relative months play. Again, as Vin had said before, the HSA month of January is often a fluctuating factor, so you don't want to necessarily treat every month exactly the same. Also, our worst year, which, as I said, was fiscal 20, what would happen if we had claims equal to our worst year, which was a little under 1.7 million. Even if we had those worst 6 months again, what we're showing is we would project to end up around 2.2 million, which in our case is about 7.1 months worth of claims. So we kind of average all these scenarios for our projection at the moment, which we think will be around $2.4 million left in our balance. Again, things could turn on a dime, as we've seen. Certainly, I hope they aren't. We don't have that experience, but that's just a very brief summary of where we are on the town side of it.
I'm willing to turn over the management of the board side over to Sean, since he's doing such
I
a
didn't
great
want to
job.
say it. I didn't want to say it, but
Jim is cringing there. Jim Dascott.
Sean,
Yes,
just
John.
quickly, who backs up the town side? Is it Cigna as well?
yeah, we're on the same. We have a combined plan together.
So it's the same plan with the same benefits for, okay.
Well,
there's
that's
different-
slightly different.
Yeah, the
management.
benefits can vary. They'll have sub tiers for employee group, bargaining group, typically. That affects things like different deductible levels or different pharmacy copays and things like that.
Okay.
But yes, it's the same overall administrative plan. And again, as we've said, we are what they call self-funded. So we're paying claims. We basically just pay Cigna to administer the plan, process everything for us.
Okay.
So for that part, we all share, and then we divide up the claims.
So we negotiate together, with Cigna, with our, with USI, for our stop loss, we use CT Prime. So there is the buying power by combining forces, even though the plans, are accounted for financially separately. We do work, together, with Sean and Jim and the town side and my side to try and do everything so that we can be as efficient as possible.
All right, other questions or comments regarding this? All right, thank you, Vin. I know you got it. And I want to thank Dr. Sola. I know he joined the meeting to audit us and make comments if needed. So thank you for joining us.
I appreciate the time, everyone. Good night.
Thank
We
you, Vin.
appreciate the invitation too, to be able to articulate, what our experience has been. And obviously there was no need for me to chime in. Vin is so, well versed in this stuff. I'd be a nuisance.
Yeah, no problem. All right, thank you. Thank you, gentlemen.
Have a good meeting.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. You too. All right, so item 4, well, just to summarize that, we obviously will have continued discussions on this, and we're starting earlier than ever with this, but I think we need to continue that certainly. Item 4, acceptance and appropriation of the Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services Local Prevention Council awarded grant funds. We receive this annually, $9,100. Is there a motion to recommend this to the council? Jim or John?
I'll move it.
All right, so moved by Jim, seconded by John. Any discussion? It's an annual grant we get. Seeing none, sensing you're ready to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Passes unanimous. Next item is acceptance and appropriation of the 2022 JAG Local VCP Grant Program awarded funds. That's $20,000 for the police, I believe I read. And that is a very good gift that they will use for equipment and things. So is there a motion to recommend this to the full council's acceptance?
Moved.
Is there a second?
I have a
Yes.
second.
Any questions? All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Passes unanimous. All right, now we're on to mix my agendas up here because the information. Item 6, discussion regarding American Rescue Plan Act ARPA funds, and I believe we're going to have a update on the availability of how we can spend those and what we spent so far. So we can get that. That would be great.
Sure. You want me to kick off, Jim, and do just a brief overview of what's changed and jump in if you need it. Again, as most folks are aware, the development of the final rule for ARPA funding has taken some time from the federal level, and the final rule just came out a couple of weeks ago. We've been digesting that over the last week and confirming some of the initial word we got out of the document and the summary. As the council will recall, before there were to be certain eligibility categories, direct assistance for COVID impacted individuals or other items or projects. One-time capital projects such as water, sewer, broadband were some of the initial broad categories that were to be eligible depending on certain particulars that were going to come out in this final rule. But one of the main categories that we knew about last year that we kind of counted on as we were adopting the budget was something called lost revenue. It's a very complicated calculation that Jim and Gina and the team did various iterations of to make sure they were making the assumptions right, working with the auditors to try to determine how much money you could effectively assume had the pandemic not happened that you would have benefited from in the terms of revenue, just kind of, I guess, simply put. We had come up with different numbers that jumped around a little bit, anywhere from 3 million to maybe 4 million, depending on the assumptions that we were able to include year over year. And that was for the first year of loss versus future years, blah, blah, blah. All of that has sort of been short-circuited by the final rule because sort of similar to what you might think of as like a standard deduction when you're doing your taxes, the final rule says that for up to $10 million, a municipality can credit, can assume anything up to $10 million is lost revenue without the need for a calculation. Ultimately, as we are receiving less than 10 million, what this does in effect is mean we can use all of the 8.5 million, count all of it as lost revenue, and then ultimately decide whether the category is in a formally eligible category or not, that we want to use it for what they call general government needs. So I think from a flexibility standpoint, it's certainly welcome news. It certainly makes Jim's finance calculations a lot easier when we have to go justify an audit and file all of our paperwork. But that's the latest and greatest from really the last week and a half that we learned.
Right, and that money has to be spent over a 4-year period. And as you know, we included some monies in our budget this year, fiscal 22. So we did have some proposed uses of those funds. And I prepared this little bit of a summary just as a refresher. We originally started with 1.4 million proposed use of our ARPA funds to fund our fiscal 22 budget. A little later in the year, we decided to use an additional 325,000 for the bulky waste pickup. So right now, those two total 1.725 million. That's our revenue appropriation of ARPA funds for this fiscal year so far. Then there was a decision to use 1.5 million to shore up our medical trust fund, as you know, on the Board of Ed side. One of the concerns I had there is even with this lost revenue calculation, the money has to be spent for general government services. One of the things they specifically excluded was the use of the money to deposit in some sort of a reserve fund. Now, I know the medical trust fund is not really a true reserve fund, but it's probably a combination. Make a long story short is, I'd like to consider maybe increasing our ARPA appropriation, our revenue appropriation by that 1.5 million, and increasing our Board of Education appropriation by that amount as well, and then transferring that money into the internal service fund. Then I can argue that that is all lost revenue being used for general government services, because we have, over $100 million of general government services in our general fund. So I think that would be the cleanest way to approach that. And, I'm hoping we can give that some consideration. This
Jim.
lost revenue, I think, even from an audit perspective, it's probably the cleanest way to document the use of these funds. And as Shaw said, it's kind of like a standard deduction. So that to the extent we can take advantage of that, it just would make things a lot simpler. Again, we have four years that we can use or decide how to use this. As you can see on this chart, we had over 8.563 million that we're going to be getting for ARPA funds.
Jim, if I could ask a question.
Sure.
So with the difference, once we've allocated everything that, we've decided, already said it's going to be, that 5 million is gone, basically. You're left with the 3.338, which is technically in a reserve fund, okay, hasn't been spent.
Right.
I'm not sure what the distinction is between what the medical trust fund is, but you could figure that out someday. But what if we decided we want to use $1 million over the next 3 years towards the medical trust fund?
So, and again, I think the way to do that, because I have to show that we're using it for general government services, would be to appropriate it as ARPA revenue, like we did with the 1.4 million in the bulky waste pickup in the general fund, and then show it as a transfer or an additional Board of Ed appropriation, to the Board of Ed expenses.
Right. Okay. So that's sort of the mechanics of it.
Yes.
We're not denied the ability to say we want to spend the 3.3 million over a 3-year period. We could elect to do that, or we
Right.
could elect every year to make that decision, I suppose.
Absolutely.
But it'd be nice to codify it, David, I think, at some point. Where it goes is maybe another discussion, but
Well,
if I could just take the liberty too, on the $2 million that we earmarked for the park project. I know that in the interim final rule, in one of the Q&As, there was discussion of using ARPA funds for the maintenance of parks, but I didn't see anything yet that would allow for a capital project for a park. So that's another one that I think is a little dicey as far as meeting the requirements. If it was a water or sewer project, it'd be a little more clean cut. But even at that, we could work around that too by use of this lost revenue. We could appropriate again additional ARPA monies in the general fund and just make a transfer or allocation to a capital project to help fund it, whether it be a CNR transfer or just a transfer to a capital project. I know there was some discussion too, because since we talked about using that 2 million for the park, there was another grant, if I recall, that we just applied for, and I don't know if we've gotten any resolution as to whether we're going to be getting any funds, but we might have another funding source to help defray the cost of that project too, and we may want to rethink that all the way around before this is over.
Well, and I don't have a problem with the mechanics of changing it. And I think the only potential effective that we need to watch is, does it increase the budget in a large amount? And then how do you not have the same increase the following year? So
Dave, I can totally appreciate that, because
Yeah.
what I'm suggesting, by taking it all in as general revenue, it does increase your budgeted expenditures if you're using it to transfer monies even to other funds.
Right, but that's known and it's upfront and it's not saying, well, the Board of Ed now they're going to be up to a 10% increase last year, and this year only giving them a 6% increase, so that's a 4% cut. We're way beyond that. Those are the old days when we used to have issues like that. This is going to be straightforward, and if we increase their appropriation by $1.5 million, knowing that it's the proper mechanical way to handle it, to comply with what the ARP regulations and restrictions are, I'm fine with that.
And that's music to my ears, really, because I just have concerns about going against the grain of those regulations.
Yeah, no, and I'm fine with that. Jim and John, comments, thoughts? John?
So my only comment is that, I mean, you guys are all much more experienced with this than I am, but my only comment is that it seems like we keep thinking about these one-time funds for kind of ongoing expenses as far as the, as far as the medical trust fund goes, which I think we probably don't necessarily want to do that. But that's a conversation for budget later, I would say.
Well, I can tell you, I'll set one parameter right now. I will not support another $1.5 million coming from the remaining 3.3 million to shore up the trust fund. I won't. We have to start realizing that was to shore up. And quite frankly, that's about the amount that would be left in the budget right now if the fiscal year ended as they were expecting. And so I think the right thing by shoring it up. I don't anticipate that being a year after year item to be done. I mean, we could do other things. We could switch some of the funds in that fund from general town government to Board of Ed before we would need to do that necessarily. But so we've got other issues there. But with regard to this, I want to see us make sure that they are not continuous operating expenses that are covered by this. And I think that $3.3 million we have left, we're going to have to look at carefully. And quite frankly, one of the items I thought maybe we could consider expending is the next item on our agenda, which is discussion of the local elderly tax credit program. And that would be allowed because we could accept it as revenue, and then we could use it to offset the fact that if we increase the elderly tax credit, let's say we double it, then we have to make up $500,000. So maybe next year we double it, we cover $500,000. Year after, we plan to only use $250,000 of the ARPA funds, and then the year after 125, and then we're on our own. So those are possibilities. I don't mean to mix two agenda items, but they are related and they are interrelated here. So those are things that I've been thinking about and wanted to get on the table here. And I know we've only got a couple minutes left till the full council meeting. Certainly we will bring these items up again. I wanted you all to be exposed to them. I wanted us to have an update on it earlier than ever. And I do hope we'll have a meeting to discuss item 7 in more detail, local elderly tax credit program, because we really don't have a lot of time to talk about that tonight. But other questions?
For the February 8th, oh, sorry, maybe on the February 8th meeting, if you want to do a budget meeting a little earlier, then up to you, but.
Yeah. Let's see what the mayor puts on the agenda so that we know what our items are and if we have the time to do it then. Otherwise, we could do it a special meeting night.
Yep, that's fine.
As well. So good. All right. So just to conclude item 6, any further discussion on the American Rescue Plan, the update that we got from Jim and his recommendation of how to handle the mechanics of it?
My only, just if I could, very, very slight, if you probably saw the note I had inserted there, we did appropriate $325,000 for bulky waste. It ended up costing $239,000. So there is $85,000 there that we've over appropriated, if you will, and that's available for other use.
Yeah. Good. Okay. All right. So then if you guys can work out the mechanics and turn it into a motion for us in the February meeting, we can, if Tim would be so kind as to add that to the February agenda. If you're ready with that, we'll take care of that.
That sounds good, David. Thanks.
All right. And then I'll postpone a full robust discussion on the local elderly tax credit program due to time tonight. And if that's all right with everybody, and I'll ask that we move to adjournment.
Moved.
And seconded.
Second.
Favor. Aye. All right. We're adjourned as a budget committee, and I'm sure the mayor will call the council meeting. We don't have to switch, do we, Sean?
So you're all set?
You're all
Okay,
set.
we stay where we are. Okay, good.
And we also continue to be live on YouTube, and we are admitting all of our guests
Okay,
for the council meeting.
good.
Yeah, maybe just advise everyone we're still live on YouTube, just to be careful.
Watch what you say. As a matter of fact, I'm gonna hit the mute button.
Hey, good evening, everybody. Just to remind you that we are live on YouTube. We are just continuing the live stream from the budget committee meeting. Thanks.
I suppose this is where I could just say hi to everyone before we begin.
Hi, Liz.
Good evening.
It's always
Hi.
weird to do these Zoom meetings because you show up, normally you'd shake people's hands and you say hello, but now we're just nodding and waving. So hi, everyone.
Good evening, everyone. Glad to join you also.
Hi.
Yes.
Okay. Do we have everybody? Is it even 7 o'clock?
It is just 7, sir. And you have
Okay.
1, 2, 3, 4. I see 5 council members, 6 council members.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Well, we'll start 7 o'clock. We'll assume we're ready. I'd like to call to order the Town Council special meeting of Tuesday, January 25th, 2022. Mrs. Milton, will you call the roll, excuse me.
Mr. Slocum,
Here.
Mr. Walsh, Mr. Burway,
I'm present.
Mr. Jinks,
Here.
Mr. Mylone. Yes, he was here. Ms. Pavano,
Here.
Ms. Nichols, Mr. Talbot,
Here.
Mr. Veliver.
Here.
Well, we have a quorum, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mrs. Milton. How about if we rise for the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all. And a special thanks, of course, to our legislative delegation. I see we have State Senator Rob Sampson. We have Liz Lenahan, who's already greeted us. Let me move my screen just to see who else. I know we have Leslie Zupkis. Is there anyone else hiding among the timber? Okay, so that would look like we have 3 out of 5. So I give you a special credit for showing up. And thank you for that, especially. The council welcomes you. The council also really greatly appreciates the work you do on behalf of the town, regardless of political party. We know you do it in the spirit of representing those in Cheshire that you represent. And we very much appreciate that. And we further appreciate the opportunity tonight to go over a few of our legislative asks, if you will, as you work on our behalf. And I know together with Sean, who will make the presentation, we have Chief Drife with us. Welcome, Chief, who will also speak to this. Michelle, you're here. I'm not sure you're going to speak to any of this, but if you are, we're happy to have you here. So at any rate, Sean, you want to lead us off with just a brief review or whatever's necessary? I know the delegations received our list.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will just share my screen really quickly. Again, as Chairman Slocum said, I know everyone's received this document that the council adopted on December 14th. And also a few of these are repeats from last year, so I know you're familiar with them. The first item that the council saw fit to include in the legislative request is what we're calling juvenile justice reform, of course, and I know this is very familiar for everyone, but Cheshire has experienced these ongoing waves of car break-ins and thefts from vehicles, predominantly by youth. And again, as we acknowledge, and Chief Drife is here with us tonight to add a little more information for our own experience here in Cheshire, so I won't belabor this one, but this is something that we do want to see some progress on as this is something we certainly, when we are experiencing these waves, we get a lot of calls, understandably, from very concerned residents. Prevailing wage, again, just a request to reiterate, I know we've had this for a few years on here, but in really all the more reason in the inflationary environment that we are clearly in right now, while we appreciate that the threshold for prevailing wage kicking in is $1 million for new construction. A lot of our projects are renovations. We can't always afford to do brand new construction. And with a limit as low as $100,000, it just doesn't go as far. Certainly as it did 5 years ago, it doesn't go as far as it did last year with the prices we're seeing right now. So if you're requesting an increase, we'd love to see it up at the same $1 million. But if 500,000 was doable, I think that would be a great compromise, and we'd appreciate your support. Binding arbitration, again, I won't reiterate. I know we've asked for this for some time, as have many other municipalities. But we would like to require some language that would require binding arbitrations to conclude within a 6-month time period, because the motivations and the ongoing expense really is exorbitant and a real challenge for those of us negotiating, and a burden on the town. We have some Cheshire specific requests, as we did last year. Again, and appreciate everybody's support for the request for the transfer of the school bus depot property. I did testify on that last year. Ultimately, it wasn't called for final approval, but we hope this year we'll have better luck. And again, we'd appreciate everybody's support. And the next two are new, and I've been working with our new economic development coordinator, Andrew Martelli. We've been visiting and meeting with some of our employers, particularly our larger employers, and an issue that's come up certainly with respect to their workforce is getting their workforce to their facility. And one of the ideas we have, and I know this isn't a specific legislative item, if you will, this is really more asking for your assistance and any contacts you might have, whether it's with CT Transit or whoever we need to go to alter at least some of the primary bus route that comes through Cheshire, alternate some of the trips, as you see here in this map, to, instead of the red, which is our current bus route through town, from New Haven on to Waterbury, if that route could be modified to pass the prison property, but also Bizzuto's around Nodder Drive, the farms of Kurt's Farms area, Macy's Logistics. These are facilities that have reached out saying they're just having a hard time getting their workforce to their facility. And I don't, again, we don't have an answer here, and we know there's no bill you can pass to make this happen probably, but any assistance you could have, or putting us in touch with who we need to speak to really try to advocate for this. It's something our major employers, our largest taxpayers, are really desperate for, and we'd really appreciate your assistance. So I know you've had a chance to read it. I won't go through all of the details there. And last, I think last year there was a House Bill 6688. Again, this is another item that's come out of our conversations with many of our larger employers here in town. Again, they're in the logistics business. There was a bill that would go into effect January 1st of 2023, which imposes a tax on vehicles with a gross weight of 26,000 pounds or greater. Again, this is something, as we've discussed with these businesses, that really is going to hit them hard financially. And we'd appreciate your support in repealing or modifying that I guess, act, if you will, that was passed last year. So that concludes my brief presentation. Mr. Chairman, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you for that, Sean. So with that, the delegation has had its opportunity to take a look at this. I guess this is an opportunity for you to perhaps expound and expand, see what you might be able to do. I'll recognize Rob Sampson. Senator, thank you. Unmute, please.
Yes, sorry about that. It takes a moment to unmute.
No, I know.
Thank you very much for inviting us this evening. I appreciate this opportunity a great deal, and have enjoyed it every year that you've invited us. And I want you to know that I take your requests very, very seriously when they come to me. And last year, I took the list of requests, which is very similar to this particular list. Almost all of the items are the same, except for the bus route and the repeal of that House Bill 6688, which I want you to know I did vote against. I just looked up the roll call to make sure I was on the right side of that bill, but I did in fact vote no. And on all of the other proposals, I did put bills in for those items. And I have asked my assistant to forward over to you guys a list of those bill with the bill numbers so you can see what the status of each one was. When it comes to the conveyances, I actually serve as the ranking member on the Government Administration and Elections Committee, so I have a lot to say about conveyances. And I'm very disappointed that we were not able to get the parcel of land that was requested last time around, which I know is on your list. I did manage to get it through the Senate on the final day of the session, June 9th, but unfortunately there was not time for it to happen in the House. And that's just a frustration of there being many thousands of bills, and some are more priority to some people than others. And that was one of my priorities, but not necessarily the leadership of the House chamber. I just want to go over the other items. Senate Bill 366 was the bill I put in, which mirrors your request for changing the time frame for binding arbitration. And Senate Bill 367 is the bill I put in last time around regarding the prevailing wage threshold to $1 million, same as you've requested now. I serve also as the ranking Republican member, the leader of the minority on the Labor Committee in Hartford in the state Senate. And every legislative session starts with us actually behind closed doors meeting with the leadership of the majority to discuss all of the bill proposals and discuss what we're actually going to do. And I'm sad to report that despite my best efforts in proposing those bills, I could not convince the two Democratic co-chairs of the House and Senate, Senator Julie Kushner and Representative Robin Porter, to take up either one of those bills, despite my sincere efforts. And in fact, dropping the names of Representative Linehan and Senator Abrams, I thought might coax them into cooperation, but it didn't work, sadly. As far as the juvenile crime issue, there were dozens of bills proposed in the last session, primarily by Republicans, but by both parties. And I did also submit Senate Bill 517 and Senate Bill 532 and Senate Bill 537, all designed to reverse many of the policies that have led to the uptick in crime that we've been discussing for years. I'm happy to talk to you guys further about why I think that crime wave is occurring and what we need to do to fix it. But I don't want to monopolize the meeting. I just want to let you know that I did take you guys very seriously with your list of requests last year. I can show you the bills that were proposed and what happened with each one. And I will go back to the drawing board again this session and reach across the aisle to try and convince my colleagues in the majority to take up these bills, because they are sincerely in need in many communities around the state and certainly in Cheshire. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much.
Well, I thank you for that, Senator. And with that, this might be a good opportunity to segue into the chief to sort of expand upon maybe what's happening in Cheshire, what's happened in Cheshire. I know, Representatives Linehan and Zupkus clearly understand what's going on. They've got their heads in it. I'm not sure they all have their arms around it yet, but I know it's a huge issue that you guys are aware of. But Chief, if you could perhaps expand upon it, bring a more fulsome picture as it pertains to Cheshire to the group, and then I'd welcome any follow-up from Ms. Zupkus and Ms. Linehan. Reps.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Look, this is an issue that came to everybody's attention over the course of the last couple of years, sadly through some tragic incidents that happened around the state. We had as we've pointed out in the past, this is very sporadic when it happens. You've all heard me say before that, we'll go 14 days with nothing, and then, we'll get 4 car break-ins and 2 stolen cars in one night. And that, I think that continues to happen. We were fortunate in town last year, although we did have a slight increase in larcenies from, I believe it was from 150 to 156. So that's 150 in 2020 up to 156 last year. The vast majority of our larcenies are thefts from motor vehicles. We did have actually quite a significant drop in stolen cars from 48 in 2020 down to 35 last year. Again, as most of you know, we've, at Sean's direction, we've assigned 2 officers, one officer and 1 detective to the Southington Auto Theft Task Force, which I know is something that Mrs. Linehan has proposed some legislation on. That's been very effective for us. It's allowed us to follow up on these cases through investigations. Again, as I don't want to sound like a broken record, but the chances of a police officer stumbling upon an active car break or car theft in the middle of the night in our 33 square mile jurisdiction are pretty slim. And again, as we've all come to learn, when you do stumble upon people in the middle of the night and try to stop them, they don't stop for you, and we just simply won't run the risk to everybody's safety of pursuing what might turn out to be a 13 or 14-year-old kid driving a stolen car. Again, I think the efforts that we've made to bring attention to this have been successful in that they've brought a lot of attention to it. Mrs. Upkus hosted along with Mr. Fishbein, hosted a forum in Cheshire last year that got quite a bit of community presence and input into, and we had some good conversations there. It's a little unclear to me at this point exactly what the legislature is going to be able to do to bring some of the resolutions that we think will be successful, like increasing the ability of the juvenile justice system to detain, again, multiple repeat serial offenders. Nobody's advocating that that every kid who who gets caught driving without a license gets locked up until they turn 20 or anything like that. But again, we're seeing case after case where these kids have multiple pending felony cases. And that, it becomes obvious, I think, at that point that whatever the juvenile justice system is trying to do for those kids is not having the desired effect. And at some point, it becomes the responsibility of that juvenile court system to protect the victims. And if that means, having more secure facilities where people can be detained, then that's certainly what I think, should be the response. And I understand that there are a lot of people in this state who don't believe that there's really any reason to ever detain a juvenile for anything, is what it comes down to. One of the advocacy organizations sent out a press release not that long ago saying that detention is never the answer. So, I know we're up against it, when it comes to that, and there's a lot of passionate advocates on both sides who can, spit data out at, supporting every single argument that anybody wants to make. But again, hopefully there'll be some movement to do something. I think this is one of the things that a lot of people are saying is at least influenced in a negative way by the pandemic, along with every other social ill that has increased in the past 2 years. And, so maybe they'll be proven right. And as soon as the pandemic is over, all this stuff will just go away. But I'm not going to hold my breath for that. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Chief. I see a hands up from Ms. Lenahan, followed by Leslie Supkis. So we'll start with you, Liz, if I may.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for having us here tonight. This is always one of my favorite nights because we get to finally see where our priorities align. And I think that there's actually more that we can come together on than we disagree on. Chief, thank you very much for everything that you just said. I can't say that we disagree. It's sometimes it's a matter of how we go about getting things done. We all have the same end game. So I want to just point a few things out. The chief did talk about an email that I had sent to all members of the council. I hope you received it. That does outline some of the legislation that I have put forward already here for 22. Among those is what the chief alluded to, is that additional funding for the regional car theft task forces. This has proven to be successful, not only for Cheshire and Southington, but other towns as well. And we want to, or rather, I would like to see the state put money behind further collaboration. I think that's really important. With that said, though, something that Chief did say was that it's difficult to really be there when a crime happens. I have to agree that's true, especially when these crimes, if they happen in the overnight, there's only 3 officers on the overnight. So I am going to commit to every person here that I am going to do my best to help solve the problem on the state level. But community policing is a municipality's issue, and I'm asking if you guys could kind of meet us halfway. And the more we see an uptick, perhaps we can start talking about the need to fund overtime for police officers on the overnight shift, so there's more than 3 officers when we're starting to see ticks. When we talk about helping fund overtime for officers, the state has done that before. And if we show that the municipalities are kind of getting their hand in there too to meet us halfway, perhaps the state can continue to help fund some of those overtime hours. I will say that in talking with everyone, the one real big thing we can agree on is the best thing to do would be to deter crime before it happens. And so my hope is that we can maybe work out the ability to put more police on the streets. I do commend Chief. I know that you have 2 recent hires. That's really exciting. And I can't wait to see them hit the ground running. And let me know if there's anything else that I can do on the state level to really try to get those numbers up for you. With that said, we did have some crime that happened in the middle of the day this week, right? The theft of the catalytic converters. This is something that is happening across the country. The value of the metals contained within the catalytic converters they just keep rising and rising and rising. And so now we have a crime of opportunity where, once again, it would be great if we had more police visible out on the streets to deter that. That would be a municipal thing. And here on the state level, I did put forth legislation to try to thwart the easy sale of these catalytic converters after they are stolen. It's really just an idea at this point. We are going to hopefully go to public hearings so we can make sure that it gets completely fleshed out, but essentially making it harder to sell those things by requiring the Department of Consumer Protection to keep a database, and no person can sell more than 3 catalytic converters in a 12-month period without a dealer license. Or we could have simply just the slowdown of the payout, which would mean that you can't just go and sell a catalytic converter at a yard and get cash back. What you would need to do is have a 5-day waiting period and have a check mailed. These are all things that are kind of modeled off of what we do with pawn shops. And I'm really glad to hear that there has been support on both sides of the aisle for this legislation. And I look forward to continue to flesh that out. Additionally, if you can see from the email that I sent, there were other things that I have proposed on behalf of the town of Cheshire. I am just going to give me a second here to pull it up because I tend to forget things as the night goes on and working all day. So I'm going to pull up the email real quickly. I will just say, in addition to funding the regional car theft task forces and the DCP database, I've also put in legislation, which Senator Sampson, I'm really happy that hopefully you and I can get this across the finish line together. That would be the conveyance of DOC land to Chespercott. conveyance of state land known as the bus depot to Cheshire. Also, utilization of DOT funds to rebuild and or reinforce the retaining wall along Route 10. This is something I've heard not only from town officials, but also from constituents. So hopefully we can do that. Additionally, I want to point out, even though it's not on the list of priorities that were given to me by the town, I know that they are priorities with some individuals who represent the town and work for the town. I want to point out that I am the speaker's designee for the children's mental health bill that we'll be putting forward. It's going to probably be the largest bill of the session, and it's really in response to the crisis that we have. And while currently the first draft of this bill is many pages, I will say that the legislation will, among other things, create and fund programs that will be utilized by Cheshire's Human Services, Chesprocott, and Cheshire Public Schools to support the mental health of our youth. Additionally, because I am the chair of the Children's Committee, I will be raising significant amounts of legislation to support our children, whether it be through mental health or other things, including substance abuse. So through the committee, I'm raising a bill to fund the adolescent expert training, Narcan use training, and to provide Narcan or a similar opioid antagonist for any school who requests it. Just keep in mind, I see Michelle Piccarello here. I want you to know, Michelle, that working with you for so many years has kind of put your voice in the back of my head. And in order for schools to obtain any Narcan, they first have to agree to be trained in the adolescent expert program, because we don't just want to have one side of it. We want to actually stop kids from starting and doing and being addicted to drugs in the first place. And also, I'd like to take a second to actually congratulate Michelle, because later on your agenda, you are approving a grant that she received for her work. And I support everything you do. I just want to say thank you so much for everything you do for our kids. And then finally, and I say finally only because this
You're almost done.
Yeah, well, yeah, this is just the amount of bills that are already in there. I want to make it very clear that there will be more bills coming forth if you need me to do that. There is a deadline, so we have to, after this meeting, please let me know immediately if you want something in. But we're also going to be putting forth bills that have additional protections for children from predators in the school system after the rash of adult sexual misconduct cases around the state of Connecticut. I'd like to, I know Superintendent Solon is not on this call, but the work that he's done in mental health and supporting our children and their emotional needs is second to none in this state. And I'd like to thank him for his input on all of those children's bills that I put forth. He's been really a fantastic reference for me. And I will take any questions regarding the bills that I'm putting in. And I hope that we can continue to work together. So thank you.
We can certainly continue to work together. Leslie, I'd like to give you an opportunity to speak because your hand is up.
Great, thank you. Hi, everybody. It's great to see you. Wish we were in person. But juvenile, justice reform, as you said, is a huge issue. Cheshire's pretty fortunate, I'll say. It's not as predominant as it is in a lot of other towns. This is a big issue, and there's going to be a lot of legislation on it, whether it's coming from me, my colleagues. Some of the things that I really want to focus on to help curtail this is to really look at the police accountability bill. We have some legislation being written up as we speak to talk about, there's some things in there that need to be repealed, quite honestly, taken out. There's some good things in it, but there are some things that have really hindered what our policemen can do. So that will be a focus this year for sure. The other thing is the 6-hour detention. I think, Chief, you mentioned that. That is another focus. It's a simple fix. And it will really help. Right now, if a juvenile gets picked up, the policeman can only hold them for 6 hours to get a detaining order. If the judge is sleeping, it's in the middle of the night. So we're going to get that extended, we hope. The other thing is there's some facilities that need to be reopened to house some of these kids. As Chief said, we don't want to put everybody in jail, but there are 10 to 15 kids that all the police know about that need to be put in jail. They need to be held accountable. It's not only safe for all of us and a public safety concern, but it's not helping the juveniles that are committing these crimes. They need to be held accountable. The other thing that is being worked on right now is Connecticut is one of the states that gets the most funding or gives the most funding for these juvenile programs. And so a few of us are meeting with some of these agencies to get the benchmarks and what is happening. We're funding these programs. What are your outcomes? And believe it or not, it's hard to get that information, but hopefully there's a meeting coming on the next couple of weeks where these agencies will turn over that information and we'll see how their programs are working, because they're getting a lot of money and it seems to be getting worse. So those are some of the things that will be on the forefront of my session coming up. Prevailing wage, put it in again. This has been a fight. We got a little progress a few years ago, but I know how difficult it is and what it costs the town. So if we could ever get that up and work across the aisle to help us get that up, I know that it would help with the town's budget tremendously. Binding arbitration is the same thing. Sean, I would be happy if we could even get a year. I would love to get it down to 6 months. But as you know, there's no time limit now. So again, it will be on the agenda, proposed legislation, and we'll hope that we can get it over the finish line with help from our majority leaders and parties. I will ask everyone in the delegation to sign on to that. Hopefully that we can help get that across for you. Transferring the bus depot property, we'll work at that again. I will tell you, number 5, this is a difficult one. I met with last year in Waterbury for Prospect. We tried to get a 3-mile extension from the Naugatuck Industrial Park up to a couple of manufacturers in Prospect. We had a meeting with DOT and a bunch of those folks, and it is difficult and we could not get anything done, honestly, because of the unions. They have a set schedule and we could not get any more. We couldn't even get, it's literally not even 2 miles that we could get added, but I am for pushing this. I'll work with, the delegation here to get it. I know how important, we understand how important it is to get jobs. People need jobs and need to work. And if people are willing to hire, we need to do all we can to help them get those hired. And then, as far as number 6, I did not support this bill. It's just a tax on businesses, which makes all of our products more expensive. And I forget who was talking about that it needed to be modified. I say it should be repealed. And again, that will be on the forefront. So any questions, I'm here. I'm here to help you in any way I can, and I'll leave it at that unless you have any questions. Thank you.
Well, I know we've had, thank you very much, Leslie. I know we've had the 3 of you have an opportunity to speak, but I'd like to give my colleagues, if they so choose, an opportunity. Maybe they were perked by something they heard from either one of you. But if there's anyone on the council that has a specific question, Mr. Walsh, I see. Is there any others? I don't see everyone at once. So after Don is done, if somebody wants to chime in, please do so.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for coming. I appreciate you guys spending. I know you're getting ready to have a busy schedule the next few months, but appreciate you taking the time to talk with us and listen to what our concerns are. I just wanted to just touch base a little bit on the catalytic converter. I know Representative Linehan had mentioned she's creating legislation for that, but I'm in the precious metals business as well. And there's no more precious metal than rhodium right now. 6 years ago, rhodium was trading at $600 an ounce. 9 months ago, it was trading at $26,000 an ounce. Today, it's around $16,000 an ounce. A catalytic converter contains about 1 to 2 grams of rhodium. That will translate into about $500 to $1,000 on the scrap level for one catalytic converter. This is why we see the uptick. What I would suggest you do, instead of rewriting a new statute, go into the current one, which is I think statute 409, chapter 21, that already is in place for precious metals dealers who have to, have a license in each town they do business in. They have to hold the items for 5 days. It's all the stuff that you had wanted. And I would suggest looking into that, and maybe it's easier to adapt one that's already in place rather than rewrite a new one. And I think you could get it done quicker, because if we make it more difficult for them to sell these things, it may make it less appealing to steal them. So I think that's one thing that I would suggest you look into.
Can I answer that before you go on to your next thing?
Sure.
Councilman Walsh, I want to thank you very much for that, because that really is exactly what I'm doing. Right. And I recognize that I'm attempting to solve a problem without the depth and breadth of knowledge that you have and that others in your industry have. And so I'm really looking forward to the public hearing process. So we can kind of, what I call, get into the nitty gritty of that. And really, I want to hear about how it works for you and what you're currently subjected to. And so, yes, I do want to mirror it on those statutes. Your input is going to be extremely helpful in that. And if you wouldn't mind just taking 15, 20 minutes a day in the next weeks, to the chair of the committee, and we really fully, because it's different proposing a bill in the short session, but when we fully get it together, I'd like to have that information under my belt that came directly from you. So if you wouldn't mind sparing a few minutes to sit with me to do that, I'd greatly appreciate it.
I'd be happy to do that. I've been dealing with this statute for 35 years, so I've seen a number of changes and I know what's going on. So I'd be happy to help you with that.
Thank you.
The other thing is, putting more police out, as Chief Drive said, you could put 40 officers out. It won't cover the entire town. So I'm concerned about, putting a tax on our citizens to put more police officers, and they still might not see them with the way Cheshire is set up. But I appreciate, any kind of input that people can give us to figure out a way to stop this. I agree with everybody on the part about, what Representative Zipka said. We need to, some of these kids need to be in jail. And I'm hoping that we can come up with some kind of legislation for that. But thank you very much. That's all I have to say right now.
I'd like to address that if I can. A few things. First, there are some kids that unfortunately need to be in jail. I don't disagree with that. I think kind of more that what I disagree with is what we do when they're incarcerated. And that's the second step. That's beyond what we're talking about when we're talking about community level policing. Because as you know, the Department of Justice did a whole report on what's going on at Manson Youth Institution, and we're not educating the kids and they're not getting mental health. And so there's a whole host of problems. I certainly am not one that is opposed to needing to detain children. I just think that we have to make sure we're talking about, and I see Senator Sampson making a face, but I've said this over and over again, I'm not opposed to detaining children. I do think that it's important that we talk about the difference between repeat offenders and first-time offenders. And I think that most of us can be on the same page with that. However, talking about putting more police on the street, I've been looking at a lot of data that shows surrounding community policing. And it really does show that when people see police on the roads, that they tend to think twice about committing a crime. I understand. I would never call it a tax on our community, because when you talk to members of the community, which I do often, they want to see more police. They want to have more people out there. we have said for a very long time, since the time I was on the council, that the police department hadn't been staffed at levels, first of all, that were suggested by the FBI's ratio of officers to residents. And I think now with the hire of 2, we're still, is it 1 short, chief, from what the, yeah. And so, you know, I get it. We want to keep taxes down, but if we're talking about prioritizing public safety, the state can't be the only way that we're prioritizing public safety. There needs to be a community buy-in. And, you know, we do have some concerns where police officers have left due to pension issues. I know that it's not the big pom-pom issue that everyone wants to talk about, but I think it's really important that at the very least, we start asking the questions that recruitment and retention, does that also include the fact that there's no pension for the cops anymore? Does it also include morale?
If I may, Liz,
mhm.
You're getting into council areas, which I'm not certain you're that all familiar with.
If you could correct me, that would be great.
Well, only the fact that the word no pension was used, that's a big mistake. An
I
error,
should say a
perhaps.
reformed pension.
Right.
Hybrid.
And again, these are policy decisions. But when the comment comes across that the kids at Manson are being taught terribly, it may well be the fact, but I would suggest that many of the kids who are doing some of this criminal activity aren't bothering to be educated either. Now, I could be wrong on that.
Yeah, there was a U.S. Department of Justice report that came
I'm
out that
not
actually said their
challenging
constitutional rights were being violated.
And that may well be the case, and I'm not arguing, but all I'm saying is those same children, juveniles, if you will, may well be out of school for the purpose of having a stealing cars. And don't go
I
to
was
school
talking about
every day.
incarcerated children.
No, I understand that, but there's a bit of a trade-off at some level here. It's not all. I'd rather see enforcement and a crime. You pay for a crime at one level or another. Somebody has to be deterred, and it's not all going to happen in the mental health community. Is my opinion. That's a policy argument, but I think there's evidence of that. But that again is not the point of this debate. That's not the point of the debate at all. The town has an issue. It has a concern. You guys have to bargain up in the Capitol. And people with my position, perhaps Senator Sampson's and Ms. Upkiss, their positions may not bear out because of minority status. But I can tell you, the public writ large is tired of crime at all levels, national, and it is. And it's going to come back to bite you. And I don't want anyone getting bitten, but we have to look at this and coalesce around reasonableness. That's all I'm going to say. That's the end of it, because I know you guys can handle the debate much better than me. I do see a hand from Senator Rob Sampson, but I have one more question for my colleagues. I know that Don had an opportunity to ask a question. I don't see everyone at the same time. Are there any other colleagues that had a specific question? Mr. Jenks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I just had a comment. And first of all, thank you to Senator Sampson and Representative Zupkis and Lynn Ann for being here tonight. We really appreciate you guys coming out to hear our concerns and look forward to what you can do for our town this coming session. The comment that I had really just had to do with this discussion we're having about juvenile justice. It had more to do with the fact that some of the points that Representative Lynn Ann brought up about staffing and things that we can do in the town. We're going to be discussing, I think soon in the council, the public safety survey that the Public Safety Commission did recently. And once you get a chance to look at that, the counselors, you're going to see what the community wants more of is more policing and more public safety, whether it's safety on the roads or addressing the car break-ins. The chief knows this very well, of course. So we may need to look at, the council, I think, is going to be needed to look at, how we can maybe 48 officers isn't enough. Maybe we need to be looking at increasing those numbers in some way. Or it's a compensation issue or incentivization issue, whatever it may be. I think that we do need to take a stronger look or longer look at staffing and ways that we can improve and perhaps grow the police department to address what is clearly a great concern and need in our community, and that is public safety. So that's just a comment that I wanted to make before we move on.
And I would argue, without an argument, that our goal and job, number one, is public safety. And I think everyone on this call knows that. And I think how we arrive at those conclusions is a dollar and cents issue often, but a lot of times it's just brains in gear. I think we need to get our heads together on some of these issues. And I think we can do that. I'm very hopeful. I know it's a short session and you have to prioritize, but I'd love to see you work on some of the old questions of the last 2 years that aren't resolved yet, instead of some of the new, perhaps, that everyone loves to introduce with every session. And I'm not picking on anyone who suggested something. Was there any other colleague that had a question before I go to Mr. Sampson? Oh, Mr. Milone. Oh, could I just mention, John, as you speak up, that to our state delegation, John is our new face on the council. We welcome him. And if you haven't met John, he's a wonderful guy, and we're all glad he's on board with us.
Thanks.
Mr. Milone.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all for helping us here. It's very nice to see everyone. I think it's the first time I've had a chance to meet everyone personally. I just curious, Representative Lenihan, I might have missed it, but what is your position on House Bill 6688? I'm just curious. Maybe I missed you responding.
So that would be the highway tax.
Yes.
Yeah. So when that came out, I was actually, I'm gonna admit I was steamrolled. I had a amendment that would actually take out all agriculture from this. It was ready to go on the floor, and I was steamrolled, unfortunately. And they changed it to only the dairy industry. I was furious, and I led a big revolt on the floor. But unfortunately, the amendment passed. And therefore, the bill itself did pass. I am very supportive of either repealing or changing it. We have had discussions of the fact that the state's coffers are looking pretty good right now. And at the very minimum, what we can do is put a pause to see, how we get through the recovery. But I would have to see ultimately what a full repeal would be and how that coincides with the new federal dollars that are coming in from the Biden transportation plan. So sometimes what you think is happening 1 year because of changes to federal legislation, or even the way our rainy day fund or how our consensus revenue is coming in. It can change your mind on some things. But I will tell you that there is some discussion. I am a member of the Moderate Caucus, and there is discussion of the Moderate Caucus on looking at the minimum, a short-term repeal of that. However, I would truly support going back to my original amendment of actually having all agriculture be out of that.
Okay, thank you. I mean, I would support full repeal as it pertains to at least our businesses in Cheshire, and probably as I look at a national level, our supply chain issues would be adversely impacted by the bill the way it sits. So I would hope that we can get some support for repeal. So
far, there's no data to suggest that supply chain issues would be affected by this, but that is something that we can ask further questions on, and I will do that on your behalf, and I will get back to you when I have an answer.
Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
And another point, Ms. Lenahan and anyone else on the delegation, to the whole thing is that when that bill was crafted, I believe it was supposed to go towards infrastructure improvements, and the state is the recipient of boatloads of cash. I think most of us in this at this dais are concerned about where that excess funding through a tax, an unfair tax on shippers and carriers, where that money's going to go. If it doesn't need to go there. I mean, it's going to go towards whatever. I mean, that's what can happen. So we thought it was almost a revenue neutral sort of thing if it goes away. I mean, I know you can never say revenue neutral because there'll be 1,000 ways to spend that money on a new program. But if you look at it with that lens, you might be able to sell it a little more easily to some colleagues.
Moderate caucus is behind it. We've been talking about it. We haven't taken an official vote, but that there are conversations. But, I just want to throw out there that the heaviest trucks on the road are the dairy trucks, and it's supposed to be a usage fee. And the dairy trucks are the ones that aren't paying for it. So I'm still a little bitter and angry about that.
Gee, I love my milk.
Can I just add one thing to that? As I said before, I'm for repealing it. I didn't support it. I will not support it. However, to ever repeal something, as long as I've been up there, Rob's been up longer than I have. I've never seen anything repealed or
I get it.
fixed. So unfortunately, but I will, hopefully, and my colleagues will push to get that repealed. I've never seen it happen.
Well, if it isn't repealed, and it won't be, I'm sure you're right. Well, let's put the money where it's supposed to go at the very least. I guess this is my big issue with stuff that suddenly is there and it can be spent on a quote unquote another rainy day or project. Okay, Mr. Sampson, you are owed an opportunity to speak, and then I have a question.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you especially for indulging me a second time. My mentor and predecessor, former Senator Joe Markley, taught me the most valuable lesson in politics, which is nobody ever said, I wish that politician spoke longer. So I will try and convey as much information I can as briefly as I possibly can. I raised my hand a second time after listening to the chief because I just feel like you guys are owed some straight talk. I know there's a tremendous desire for working together and bipartisanship, and I believe very strongly in that as well. And I work as hard as I can with my colleagues here on the dais, but also with my colleagues in Hartford in both parties. But there are facts, and facts are how people vote, what bills they put in. And I think that is important information that should never be overlooked. And I would encourage each one of you guys to review the record when it comes to these items. On the subject of juvenile justice, I was first elected to the House in 2010 and started my service in 2011. Shortly thereafter, there was a bill to repeal the death penalty, which passed largely on a party line vote supported by Democrats and Republicans, but certainly a more or less party line vote. Following that, there was the creation of Governor Malloy's risk reduction credit program, which let violent felons out of prison early. And this passed entirely on a party line vote with all Democrats in favor and all Republicans in opposition. And I've spent the last almost 10 years trying to repeal various parts of it, including a bill that I put in last year and will put in again to repeal at least the parts that we shouldn't be giving good time behavior to people that commit rape or violence with a gun. And yet those are non-starters apparently in the legislature. After that, there were several other bills to raise the age at which we treat juvenile crime, which I think is the major contributor to the juvenile crime rise that we are facing today. Then there was the executive branch's determination to start closing juvenile detention centers. And then, of course, a bill called excessive use of force, and then a bill that would eliminate police chases, then a bill to prevent consent searches, then the police accountability bill undermining police officers altogether. Every one of these items, as they came to the legislature, were initiatives taken by the majority party, and they were opposed vehemently by me and Leslie and other Republicans in the legislature, and they were passed over our objections on party line votes. So that's just a fact. And if you want to understand why the crime wave is hitting our state, that is the reason, more than any other single thing. And I would suggest that we need to go to the drawing board and start repealing some of those items. I am in agreement with Representative Linehan that, we have to address the ability to treat juvenile criminals as human beings and not just lock them up. Any inference that that's what me or any other of the Republicans are about is false. And I'm more than happy to come up with solutions to rehabilitate some folks. But those are the problems that led to the crime wave we have, and we have to address it. The other items that are on your list and are on this list every year, prevailing wage, binding arbitration, all of these items, these are labor issues. And they are also things that Republicans repeatedly bring up year after year. I propose these bills year after year. And I would encourage my colleagues on the Democrat side that represent Cheshire to join me this time in co-sponsoring those bills so that when I go to the chair of the Labor Committee and say, hey, even my Cheshire Democrats are with me on this, we actually have a chance. But sadly, the majority party in Hartford is very much beholden to organized labor in this state. And I think those are non-starters. And I don't know that my colleagues would even be willing to co-sponsor them. And finally, on the subject of the highway use tax, that is a bill that passed despite the objections of Republicans. You can look it up on the Connecticut General Assembly website. It was a party line vote. It wasn't just, all these people, it was party line. Republicans voted no, Democrats voted yes. There is very little chance of repeal of that or any of the other crime-related matters until there is significant pressure from the public saying that these things need to be changed, or there is a change in the makeup of the General Assembly. And that's just the straight talk I have for you guys. All I will say is that I'm bringing it up because I believe the people that are watching, as well as you fine folks on the council here, deserve to know the truth about why we are in the situation that we are. And the more truth that people know, the more they will be informed when they make their decisions at the ballot box this November and going forward. And I really appreciate that. I'm not intending to be divisive in any way, shape, or form. I simply just want the record known on where we stand on these issues, because it's frustrating for me to come back to this panel year after year and say, I tried, because I did legitimately try. I put in every bill that you guys asked for, and I fought for all of them. And I will continue to do that as long as I'm there.
Senator, to your point, the council, when it reviewed the requests, that we would be putting together, we look at the same ones over and over again, and we realize that, we're contributing to the pounding of sand. But it's also, if you don't pound at a little sand once in a while, it's almost as if you've forgotten about an issue that's important, that it has impacts on your community, and the folks decide that, well, you really don't give a darn, or something else happens, they move, and they're just gone.
Well, I'm happy to pound the sand with you, Mr. Chairman, and I will continue to do it as long as I can.
Well, that's why we look at the list critically, and we do, reintroduce some of the same stuff to you. I had a question, if I may, and I think it is something that Ms. Linehan said, Liz. You had indicated an interest in trying to get a transfer of certain properties. I, for one, was only aware of a property transfer of the bus station. I wasn't aware of any property transfer for Cheshire. I recognize they're not a council committee, but it was news to me. Could you expound upon that?
Sure. Maura Esposito has spoken to me casually, but because we're in a time crunch, casual doesn't work. We can always take back a bill or not move it forward, but I know she's been looking at some of the Department of Corrections property, the prison area, in order to move Chesprocott so they can do more things, community outreach and vaccination clinics and things like that. And she just thinks it would be a great spot. So I did put in the legislation. Maura is currently putting forth her, there's paperwork that has to be filled out, and you have to submit plans on what she wants to do, and she's getting that together. So ultimately that will be available for Senator Sampson and the House and Senate chairs of the committee to take a look at. And she will, I'm sure at some point she'll make that known to all.
And that that's a piece of blank real estate, or is something with a structure on it, or can't you say? I'm just curious.
So I will know that when we get back to paperwork that she's required to fill out. And so we'll see.
Okay, because the towns, of course, also contribute to their budget line. We pay per resident, so to speak. We have a piece of the action for all the help they give us. So anyway, I appreciate that.
Sure.
Anything else as a wrap up? I guess if I don't see any more comments or questions from my colleagues, I do want to greatly thank you. I know, tones vary over the course of these political debates, and they do become political at some time. If mine rose to a level of beyond my typical wonderful self, I apologize for anything. Nothing inferred other than complete respect and thanks, and the understanding that you're poker players, tough players, and everything else that goes into doing your job every day. You need to be. And finally, no one is ever happy. And that's the way it goes. Anything else, guys? Well, you can go to your next Zoom meeting. Thank you so much.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everybody. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Always one of the more delightful parts of our calendar year to talk to our colleagues. Anyway, we now go on to business item 4, which is the approval of the recommended changes to the senior center dispatcher job description. Ms. Nichols, I know you're waiting in the wings, wholeheartedly ready to endorse this and bring it forward.
So
We do need you unmuted.
You're still muted.
Unmute. Is that better?
There you go.
Yeah,
Okay,
it's
wrong
unmuted.
switch. Wrong switch. Okay, I'm waiting patiently in the wings. That was a very interesting conversation, and I'm reminded as I look across the wall at this picture hanging on my wall. And sometimes I think we all need to pay attention to this. I don't know if you can read it, but my husband had this on the wall and he taught me about it. And it says, "Let thy speech be short, comprehending much in few words." I think we have comprehended much, and now it's time to move on. So my resolution is, be it resolved that the town council approves resolution 012522-1. Be it resolved that pursuant to the recommendation of the Personnel Committee, the Town Council approves the changes to the Senior Center dispatcher job description as presented.
Second.
I'll give you just a brief overview, and Michelle is here and Stephanie are both here from the Senior Center to fill out or answer any questions that you may have. But it was interesting to me, and I think other members of the committee, the depth of the job of the senior dispatcher and how it has evolved over the last couple of years, particularly because of COVID, and how much more responsibility is being taken over by that dispatcher and how valuable it is to the senior center programs. During the last non-pandemic year, over 8,700 rides were provided by transportation at the senior center. And that has escalated since the COVID issue has arisen. So Michelle, if you want to just give us some more information, the Personnel Committee felt that the changes that we are hoping to adopt will be passed. I hope that you all got the paperwork explaining what those changes are going to be. Michelle, you might want to just quickly enumerate in list form sort of the things that we need to change.
In terms of the specific changes that need to be made, we're looking to increase the position by 5 hours and reclassify it to an N2 from an N1 to an N2. And then we've added some administrative responsibilities to the position, which quite frankly, the person that we've had in this position, for those of you who don't know, Eileen Caldwell, who was with us for many, many years, and she just recently retired. And I have had the blessing as a human services director to always have had staff who go above and beyond without necessarily getting credit for it. And Eileen was certainly one of those people in this position. And she took on added responsibilities and grew with this position without question. And the staff around her did as well. But what we found now that she's retired and we're advertising to hire someone to replace her is that we really need to adjust the job description to reflect the responsibilities of that position. And so that's what we're looking to do. And, you know, we want to continue to serve the seniors in our community to the best of our ability. And we believe that these changes are necessary in order to do so.
Thank you. And I think it is important to realize that it is not just coordinating the transportation services for the seniors, but also assist with the lunch and the food and the physical setup of activities that are going at the senior center, the programs that you managing the trips out of town to appointments that are in New Haven that sometimes don't get back to town until after the hours of that dispatcher have ended, and therefore there is no one there to sort of triage if there's a problem with that transportation. So all of those things are part of this job. And when you say coordinates transportation, that's drivers, that's vans, and it's a whole lot more involved. So it was the Personnel Committee's recommendation that we follow up with your recommendation and request. Stephanie, do you have anything else that you want to add to that?
No, I think Michelle spoke about everything that it is that we're looking to do at this time. Although there is one thing, we are implementing a new program. We partnered with the voluntary agency in the beginning of January, and some of the responsibilities of this new partnership will probably be passed along to this position as part of the programming assistant component of the new job description that we're requesting. So.
Thank you.
Colleagues, any questions? Okay. I had a question that's a bit off topic, but since it has to do with buses, I know we just ordered a few and they take a while to come in. Are you feeling pressure, Michelle, Stephanie, that you don't have enough transportation? Is there any issue like that, or does this all fit within our current models and modes of getting people around? I mean, we haven't run out of the capacity to deliver and provide services, correct?
I think right now what we're facing with the pandemic is that we're only able, well, right now the buses are running at limited capacity. We're only able to put 2 people on the bus at the same time safely. So the number of trips that we're able to take is limited. So I do think at this time we are limited in terms of the amount of transportation that we can offer. We are expecting to get 1 new vehicle to replace one of our older vehicles. And I think, you know, just like many of the other human services needs, they seem to grow over time. And so, and the needs of the residents who cannot independently transport themselves seem to change and grow as well. And so it's just trying to be responsive to the needs of the community and manage them has been a challenge, you know, although I do think we've effectively managed them up to this point. Okay. Does that answer your question?
It does. Actually, it kind of reminded me of the fact that, yeah, we're almost self-limiting because of the COVID situation, which didn't fly past me, but it wasn't deeply in my head when I asked that question. Because obviously we've compromised some services. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Well, thank you for that. I see then we're probably ready for a vote. So all those in favor of the motion signify. Okay. Looks like we have unanimous of those present. Okay. We're going to move along then to number 5, which is the approval of reclassification of the town engineer position to E4. Ms. Nichols.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Be it resolved that the Town Council approves Resolution 012522-02. Be it resolved that pursuant to the recommendation of the Personnel Committee, the Town Council approves the reclassification of the town engineer position to an E4, and be it further resolved that the Town Council approves the hiring of a full-time town engineer for the town of Cheshire.
Second.
We have a motion. We have a second. Thank you, Mr. Walsh. Ms. Nichols.
Yeah, I'm going to defer to Lou for most of the specifics on this, but we've been advertising for an assistant town engineer for some time with some difficulties in attracting people to do this job, and in looking at the requirements that are ahead for the town and the new buildings and the new businesses that are coming in, the economic development, the new projects. It was felt that we would be better served to hire a full-time assistant engineer to take on those responsibilities due to some of the changes in that Public Works department. Lou, do you want to be more specific about that? You've waited this long.
Oh, that's okay. I see George is there also, so
Okay,
yeah, George could jump in too, but yeah, basically just by the job description for assistant town engineer, the market, we've gone out, I think 4 times. I think only once did we get more than 2 applicants, and by the time we went to the interview, one had already gotten another job, and George did interview the other candidate, and we thought at that point to go back out. Whether it's the market, people retiring from the state and the state's scooping up talent, the salary range we have, Sean and George had met and thought it best maybe to reclassify the town engineer job and to maybe go back to the former model that we had when Walter was here full-time, of a town engineer and a director of public works. George, did I say anything wrong?
No, between you and Ms. Nichols, it was very well done. The only thing I can add is that we currently have nobody in this position. So we have a consulting town engineer, and due to retirements, labor actions, promotions, there's nobody left in the engineering division. So we're running critically short at this point. And we've tried a little bit of everything, as Lou mentioned, from kind of a in-house town engineer with support staff to the consulting engineer, and it seems to work best with 3 in-house folks. And we do need consultants still, even in that model, but to a much less degree. So ultimately, I'd love to see us get back to a town engineer, assistant town engineer, and engineering technician. But that's right now we're just focusing on the town engineer. And as I said, the main thing I can say is that I know Mr. Walsh asked me during the personnel committee meetings, right now we're spending about $60,000 for where we project for town engineering services just related to commissions and reviews. So that would be planning and zoning, wetlands, WPCA, that sort of thing. So more of the technical stuff. But what that doesn't get us, and many of those costs are buried in individual projects, is kind of the intangibles. So, traditionally the engineering division has dealt with the trees in town. So we take down anywhere from 150 to 200 trees a year, hazardous type trees that need to be done for safety purposes. We've got the pavement management system that the engineering department traditionally runs. We've got resident inquiries, which aren't a small amount. I've been, myself and Dan Bombero, the only two management folks left, have been dealing with them, and what's left of my hair is going gray. So I'm feeling it as far as this goes. But there's for the amount of engineering services we're currently paying for just in the reviews, we get about half the amount of hours of a full-time person. So the great thing about consultants is you only have to pay for them when you need them. The bad thing is they're not there during the rest of the time to field the routine questions, if you will, or deal with the folks that need an answer on something. And Cheshire's a very well-developed town. The populace expects a lot out of the town government, and they should. That's no question. But we want to be able to provide that too. And I don't feel like we're giving them our best effort at this point. I can tell you right now, I owe Mr. Jinks a reply on a streetlight issue that I haven't gotten around to, just because it hasn't been the highest priority thing. So I'd like to remedy that and start to rebuild this division I think the only way we're going to attract somebody is unfortunately with a higher salary and a grander title, and town engineer seems to fit the bill for that.
Questions, colleagues?
Tim?
Mr. Malone.
Yep. Thanks, Tim. I'm, as everyone knows, and I've spoken to people about this separately, I'm fully supportive of this. I think it's incredibly important for the town. As a professional engineer, I've functioned as a consultant to many communities, and I know the limitations associated with that, even though there's some advantages to having a firm available. It's not the same as having someone who's committed to the community, and this is so important to our us running well and supporting George's efforts, et cetera. Just looking for some clarification. We're looking for a town engineer. We've improved or increased the classification of that. Are we not filling the assistant town engineer and staff engineer position, or are we filling those that are just vacant right now?
I think for right now, we're focused on funding the town engineer position for this, remainder of this fiscal year through June. I think the decision to rework or possibly bring in the assistant town engineer position or not will be kind of considered in the next 2 months as we start to develop the budget. But I think part of the reason we brought this before you now, and even now as a special meeting, is we really do feel like time is of the essence. We need to start this process of bringing somebody on board, hopefully sooner than later. And yeah, as George said, I think we can see certainly a role for a more robust department, but I do think one of the challenges we probably were experiencing was we were advertising for an assistant town engineer who recognized they weren't going to be working for a town engineer. So are they going to be asked to do the work of a town engineer? They're kind of an assistant to no one, if you will. So at a minimum, we want to remedy that. We're cognizant of the budget. I mean, for better or worse, because we've operated for 6 months without the assistant town engineer, we have that $40,000 of savings because that was budgeted for ballpark $80,000. That will help us be able to fund it for the remainder of this year without a problem or an additional appropriation. Any other considerations? Clearly, there's a ramification for next year's budget, one way or the other, and we'll want to make sure we have those discussions. I'm sure that'll be a discussion come beginning March 10th, once I present the budget to you.
Yeah, thank you, Sean. I would like to just suggest that I think we're going to struggle to find a qualified town engineer if there's no commitment of potential staff. I think that it's going to be much harder to find the person we want to lead that aspect of the community if they don't have anyone that they can delegate some tasks to, and they don't think there's tasks. So I think just as important as filling this position, I think being able to tell potential candidates that there will be an ability to develop a staff will be very helpful in helping us find a good candidate for this position. So I don't know, I guess that has to go through a process, and we have to get commitment on that through the budget process or whatever. But I am concerned that trying to find a town engineer and not committing and being able to commit to them that they will have staff and they'll be able to develop staff will be a detriment to getting the right person. So I'll just
understood for sure. And one point I would make is, and I fully agree. I think one thing we'd want to make sure they understand is, again, George mentioned Dan Bombero. He was up until last year, or year and a half ago, our assistant town engineer. He's still with us. He's now been retitled capital projects manager, taking on a subset of responsibilities that would normally fall under a town engineer. He is still with us, and he is now funded half and half with the Board of Ed, as the council agreed to, as we proposed that previously, in part to help manage through a lot of PBC projects and a lot of Board of Ed projects and upcoming school modernization. As George said, Dan, with the staff shortage, Dan has been pulled, frankly, back from some of his Board of Ed, his ability to manage everything. And so he is still staffed to the engineering division in so much as he handles all the capital projects for the town. But your point is absolutely well taken, and something I think we want to make sure we have a great model going forward and try to work back from where we found ourselves after Walt was with us and then sort of stepped down his amount of hours with the town. He was very difficult to replace, as we're seeing, and he gave a lot to the town for a very limited number of hours of the month that he was here. So we knew we'd have to dig out of this one way or the other, but absolutely point very well taken for sure.
And again, Sean, I just, during the process where we're trying to pursue a candidate, it'd be nice to be able to provide some hope that they'll be building a department. Otherwise, I'm fearful that we just won't get good candidates.
No, I agree. Thank you.
I think we can get that done, John. I think that's something we all know how important it is. Of course, sorting out all the details. Was there any other of my colleagues that had a question before I asked the question? Okay, Sylvia, when you had a chance, and Lou, probably you can answer this, and Sean, I see the only thing that really was redlined on this was a date and a classification. So you were completely otherwise satisfied with the job description. That meets, none of that needed any kind of tweaking, no other demands to be placed. It was fairly comprehensive, and it was last looked at in 2018.
Correct. That's what I was going to say.
One would
a few years ago.
Right. So that would have been when we had our dear friend and good friend and good employee with us at the time. He was operating under these directives. Okay. Well, that's good because Walter obviously fit the bill. I just wanted to be sure of that, that we hadn't abandoned or missed an opportunity while you were doing all this. So you're good with it. Okay.
Kim, I think the changes in 18 had to do with who Walter supervised. I think at that time we'd gone through changes with engineering operations manager. So I think the amendments in 18 were more to who he supervised. Those titles changed because Walter had come on board well before 18.
Right. Okay. Yeah, because that was when we lost the town engineer, public works director / and we had to, adapt to George's limitations. Sorry, George, had to say that.
Nothing wrong, George, every day.
George, it's been fun adopting them. It's been no trouble. Anyway, okay, if there's nothing else, then I guess we're ready to go for a vote on this. So all those in favor signify with an aye or nay. Okay. Motion carries unanimously of those present.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll sort out and dig out my agenda, and here we go. We're going to now move to number 6, which is the approval of the clerk of the council contract. Ms. Nichols.
Thank you again. Be it resolved that the town council approves resolution 012522-3. Be it resolved, and there's a change here as I read this in the date because what you received was printed incorrectly. So I will read it correctly. Be it resolved that the town council appoints Marilyn W. Milton as clerk of the council under the updated terms and conditions as follows for the term February 1, 2022 to June 30, 2022. For attendance at meetings and preparation and submission of summary minutes for town council and town council standing committees and study groups as assigned. The rate will be attendance at meetings, $45 per hour with a 1.5 hour minimum, which is increased from 1 hour to 1.5. Billed in half-hour increments. Minutes at $13 a page for summary minutes. Clerical work for the council at $25 per hour. No additional charge for meeting attendance past 11 p.m.
Okay, we have a motion.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh. Second.
John, I would just like to preface this conversation by thanking Marilyn for the exceptional job she does on all these commissions and committees. And as a council, we have been making some adjustments to the protocol of record taking, and we are trying to make sure that all of our record keepers are working from the same sets of rules and so forth. And this will give us an opportunity in the next 6 months to work with Marilyn and the other clerks of the council that are taking minutes for other meetings to develop a plan that is sort of more contiguous for all groups and make sure that everybody's on the same page as to what their responsibilities of the clerk job are. And will perhaps set forth a succession plan, because it's getting more and more difficult to find qualified people who can take shorthand or do summary minutes and have the experience. So perhaps there will be some need to develop a set of criteria for the future of the council and other commission clerks. So this gives us that period of time to enjoy all of her continued good minutes and pick her brain for going forward to developing a new protocol for all the note takers. So Don or Peter, if you have anything to add to that, I hope I summarized that correctly.
No, that was fine, Sylvia. The only thing I would add is now that ordinance review has hopefully, I shouldn't jinx it, has blight behind us.
Yeah.
This is one of the things that ordinance review has been waiting to take up, is the whole policy with regard to minutes and electronics and all that. So.
Good.
Well, that's interesting, Mr. Talbot. I wasn't honest certain where that would have to go. Okay, so you're advising me and informing me. That's essentially where that has to end up. That's an ordinance item.
Ordinance has to change that.
It actually was started a while ago and kind of got put on hold with everything. But and David, please jump in as chair.
Because I'll make a referral at the appropriate time. Because I know we're all bogged down with time issues, but I guess we can't review this smartly probably until ordinance has looked at it, as well as a personnel review that has to be coming up before June of this year. So okay, so we'll kick that around in an agenda session then, Mr. Talbot, and take it from there. Very good. Any other questions from my colleagues? Okay, then I will call for a vote on this resolution, which I wholeheartedly support. Ms. Milton, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. And thank you, Marilyn Milton. We appreciate you.
Thank you, guys.
Okay. Did you stop taking minutes, or how'd that work out? Okay. We now move to number 7, which is the acceptance and appropriation of the Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services Local Prevention Council awarded grant funds. Mr. Bowery.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Folks, lest you think the Personnel Committee and their meeting the other day, which was rather interesting, was the only one that worked. The Budget Committee also has done some work. And be it resolved that the Town Council approves Resolution 012522-4. Be it resolved that the Town Council accepts and appropriates the annual Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services Local Prevention Council Grant Award for $9,142 to be used for programs to raise awareness about alcohol, tobacco, and other drugs, and to provide programs to prevent youth use of these substances.
Second.
Okay, discussion.
Mr. Chairman, the Budget Committee met earlier and unanimously recommends this for your consideration. And we wholeheartedly support its efforts that grant will allow for. And it's a continuation year after year. And it's wonderful programs that affect many of our young people.
Okay. Okay. Michelle, I know you're here. You probably want to cheer us on with this, but you don't have to. You could be sleeping for all I care. So she's there.
She doesn't look
okay.
sleeping.
There she is.
I was waiting just in case.
Yeah. Well, I just want to give you a chance. You can do what you got to do.
Yeah, no, we use this money every year to fund prevention and education and awareness programs for our communities and families and youth in particular around substance abuse and mental health. And we use the funds to implement only evidence-based programming and to support our youth and families to the best of our ability. So I appreciate your support for the grant.
I did notice in the grant, it says you have to use this money by June 30th of this year. Is that correct? Or
It is.
okay.
But for some reason, the funds were held up and we just got them very
Oh,
recently.
okay.
So yeah, I'm not
Okay.
sure why. So
Okay, so it wasn't for lack of not applying on time or anything like that. And you probably have programs lined up and you can spend all that money, I'm sure, appropriately.
we do, absolutely.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay, I'll call for a vote then. All those in favor? Aye. Okay, motion carries unanimously. Number 8, the acceptance and appropriation of the 2022 JAG Local VCP Grant Program awarded funds. Mr. Bowery.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And last item of business tonight, just in case the last item we just passed doesn't work, we are appropriating funds to help with this one. And that is be it resolved that the Town Council approves Resolution 01-2522-5. Be it resolved that the Town Council accepts and appropriates the 2022 Justice Assistance Grant Local VCP Grant Program award of $20,000 to be used for riot gear, mobile data terminals, and accessories for in-car connection. And be it further resolved that the Town Council authorizes Town Manager Sean M. Kimball to execute the agreement for said grant.
Second.
Hey, thank you, Mr. Jinks, for the second discussion.
Mr. Chairman, I would just comment that we unanimously recommended this to the full council and I support it. And I think we all do, hopefully, because it is nice to have this equipment. It's important just in case, and it does support our police.
We only had the equipment before we spoke to the legislators. That's too bad. But anyway, Chief, I see you're here if you want to speak to this. If you don't need to, that's okay.
I would just point out that we had hoped to use some of this money to reimburse overtime that we've expended when we put an officer on the auto theft task force, but that was not an acceptable use of the funds under the grant programming. I think I may have mentioned that at the meeting where we requested authorization to apply for the grant. The crowd control equipment, which is the batons and the shields, is part of the police accountability bill. Not that we need that equipment, but we need to develop policies on crowd control and crowd management at protests. And currently, we don't have any such equipment, or the stuff that we do have is so outdated that I can't guarantee that it'll function properly. So we got 10 shields, 10 batons, and 50 helmets. The helmet being, something that everybody gets fitted for. So everybody can have a helmet with them in their cruiser when they're working. And if we need to deploy for a protest or some type of other incident, possibly even in support of a mutual aid request from another agency, pop back to the station, grab a shield, grab a baton, and off we go. And the rest of the money was to support our continued automation efforts. That money offsets what we need to spend from the gift account when we get new cruisers and want to keep up the mobile computers that go in them. So again, a good use of the funds for things that we, one way or the other, we would be paying for. So I thank you for the support and look forward to getting the funds in and getting the equipment purchased.
Any other questions for the chief? I just have one, Chief, and that would have to do with, is this like a one-time thing? I imagine we've got enough shields to last us.
Yeah, and we can probably, the way that the helmets get fitted now, they have like inserts in them. So we might, if we have 10 people retire in the next 10 years, I don't know that we'll have to go out and buy 10 new helmets. We might be able to repurpose some of them. But yeah, the shields and the batons should last us for the foreseeable future. It's conceivable that, if we bring in somebody with a really small or really large head at some point, we might have to buy them a new helmet. But for the most part, it's a purchase that will be with us for a while, and hopefully it stays right in the ready arsenal at the police department, gathering dust.
Right. Well, I guess the heart of my question had more to do with, the assistant grant being available for other purposes. Like, would this be something you could apply for next year with another stated purpose? Or was this more or less a one-time opportunity that we availed ourselves of?
No, it's a pass-through grant that now sometimes the state holds it up for, we don't necessarily get it every single year, but we have received it quite often over the course of my 11 years here.
Okay. Okay. Thanks. Okay. Anyone else? Okay. I'll call for a vote. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All hands on ayes. Okay. Very good. Motion passes unanimously. This brings us to number 9, which is the arguable adjournment of this august group. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Oh, wow. David Felleber, you woke up. Thank you.
Yes.
All those in favor of adjournment?